I'm North Hempstead Town Supervisor Judy Bosworth, and I, along with our town board, are proud to present At Home with North Hempstead, a series of special programs for children, seniors, as well as entertainment for residents of all ages. We hope you enjoy this special presentation and check back often for new content.
I always said, welcome to Gatsby's mansion. This is this beautiful Gilded Age mansion. It was the home of the Frick family. If you know the Frick Museum in New York on 5th Avenue and 71st, this is the Frick Museum on Long Island. It's the most beautiful mansion inside. It's an amazing place in which to see art. And every single year we put on 3 beautiful exhibitions full of some of the greatest art and artists in the world inside this mansion. But today, what you're going to be learning about from me and from some of my distinguished colleagues is that surrounding this extraordinary building, this mansion, are 145 acres with trails that were laid out by the famous William Cullen Bryant that snake all around here, 11 trails, and the whole place is filled with art. Sculpture by some of the greatest sculptors in the world, including a few pieces that are brand new that you, even if you've been to our museum before, you might not know these sculptures. And also sculpture that has been here since the very beginning of the museum 30 years ago. We're celebrating our 30th anniversary. Now, I just hope that after this is all over, you'll come and join us inside as well for some of the exhibitions that we're doing, and join us outside for fresh air, for the beautiful gardens, and some of the programs that I'd like to tell you about. Even now, you can come to our museum online, the Museum from Home, and there are programs that can teach you about art. They can tell you a little bit more about the family that lived here, the Frick family. It's a wonderful, wonderful story, by the way. Really, really fascinating man named Charles Frick, who was a paleontologist, collected dinosaur bones. His lab is right over there. But also how to draw, for instance. We put all kinds of wonderful content up on our website during this time when we've all been locked down. So come when we do open. We have a lecture series, we have films, we have classes for adults, we have life drawing classes, we have classes for little children, we have a summer camp for little children that's going to be done, for instance, online. So if you have grandchildren, this is the place to be. Every time I come here and I work here, I'm inspired by the art, by, of course, nature, and by the opportunity to learn something new.
Hi, my name is Laura Lynch. I am the Director of Education here at the Nassau County Museum of Art. So excited that you'll be taking a stroll around the property, the 145 acres of the museum today. We will look at a selection of sculptures. So let's get started. To my right is our handicapped accessible ramp for our visitors that need some assistance to come up into the museum. And then I'm standing at the top of some steps to go down to the ground. So we will begin our stroll across the property to look at the artwork behind me, titled Red Bank 31 by the artist Ellen Bertolli. It is one of 5 Bertolli sculptures sited around the property. What I want us to do is to look at it from afar and notice that it is a series of rectangles, approximately 16 rectangles, that are positioned in a serial arrangement that pivots from the beginning to the end over 90 degrees. What's special about this sculpture, it is made out of steel. We might notice some coloration that changes as a result of its interaction with the environment. But we can walk through the sculpture. So I'd like to take you through as we journey through these they look like doors, possibly portals, but they are framing the landscape. So as we get to see this sculpture, we will look at it, and everyone that has the experience around and in the sculpture has a different way of looking at it. It's a different perspective for everyone interacting with the sculpture. So As we begin to look at Red Bank 31, now that we're closer, we had a perspective from further away. Now as we draw closer, we start to really see some of the colors of the sculpture, some of the surface. And as we mentioned, the sculptures are actually interacting with the natural environment. You start to see some of the coloration from rust, which is the intention of this material, which is Corten steel. We also see some lichens that are growing on the surface, which creates a beautiful and adds additional color to the works. So come over this way with me. We are now standing next to one of the first kind of serial arrangement of these very large rectangles. Bertolli was an artist who was considered to be a minimalist sculptor. That is, using materials that are often used for other industrial purposes, very simple, very spare geometric shapes. So what I would like to do is actually take a walk through and give you the experience virtually, what it feels like to walk through some of these kind of large rectangles that become frames to kind of look at the environment. So what happens with this work is that it's interacting with the environment, and the environment is interacting with the sculptures. So I'm going to step up on here. So I'm very carefully walking through, kind of weaving my body through all the works. So as I walk through approximately 10 of these rectangles, the perspective changed, the angle of these large rectangles changed, and I became invisible and out of sight for a point. Red Bank 31 is an outdoor art installation, and as a result of its exposure to the elements, there is the development of rust on this steel, this Corten steel. The artist knows this and intended this to happen. So we get additional coloration apart from the gray or more black color typically known with steel. But what also happens in the interaction with the environment and changing angles of the sun above us are these beautifully cast shadows. So the sculpture, while very static and very strong and not moving, is actually changing the environment constantly with its interaction with the sun rays coming down and projecting onto the grass behind it. Behind me is another work by the artist Bertolli. The title of this work is Wood Duck. The title refers to the ducks that live in this pond. They're somewhat shy and they hide among the reeds. But the artist, when he came onto the museum's property, he was inspired by the very round heads of the wood ducks. This is, again, a minimalist sculpture, so it's all about just very basic geometric forms. The artist cited it specifically in our pond, this very round pond, which is also kind of reinforced by the round shape of the sculpture. What makes this sculpture even more special is that it is reflected in the pond that it is sitting above. So you actually have the opportunity to see two wonderful circles based on the reflection. The work, though very static and appears to be floating, is actually sitting on top of a cement base that keeps it afloat in the pond. Though it looks like it never changes, it constantly changes based on the movement of the water and the interaction with the reflection, and also the changing light and the cloud cover that changes the color of the sculpture as the sun shines down onto the pond.
I'm Jean Henning, the museum's senior educator. I've been at the museum for many years, working in the education department and when needed on outdoor projects. I'm delighted to welcome you to this pathway that was part of Childs and Francis Frick's entertainment on summer afternoons when they had guests. When they moved here and lived here in the 1920s and 30s and 40s, a wonderful way to entertain their company if they had people visiting was to walk down the garden path from the main mansion, and to come to this garden that was designed with Mrs. Frick and Marion Kruger Coffin in the 1920s. Marion Coffin was one of America's first women landscape architects. Landscape architecture was a profession that women were allowed to enter in the early 19th century because it was considered gardening, so it was appropriate for ladies. She became very well known, and she and Mrs. Frick worked for many years on the design of this garden. This design was meant to sort of reflect the classical building that the mansion is. And it's very symmetrical, very classical, very simple straight lines. The garden is divided into 4 garden rooms, and from this perspective you can see the yew hedges that separate the 4 gardens going down different stairways. This teakwood trellis is one of the largest ones of its kind in the country. And this area was used by the Fricks for entertaining, again, on a summer afternoon. It was a lovely shady spot, some beautiful trees out here. They had some lounge chairs. We have photographs of chairs where they could sit for just a casual conversation. And if they wanted more entertainment, they had musicians. On the right-hand side, there's a little stairway that goes up to a platform, and they had musicians who would play up there while the guests enjoyed themselves out here in this beautiful shade. And there are 2 brick structures on either side of the trellis where they stored furniture in one and glassware and china in the other. So if they wanted to have a party here, they did not have to bring it all from the big mansion. It was a lovely way to live, a wonderful lifestyle, and we wish we had it today. The museum also has about 8 marked trails that wrap all the way through the forests and around the ravines. They were originally, as far as we can tell, bridle trails where the Frick family used to ride on horseback when they lived here. The Clayton Trellis Trail, which you see marked here, actually goes right around behind the back of the trellis that we just saw, and it's a beautiful trail that goes around the back behind and ends up at the other side of the parking lot. When the Fricks lived here, they also skied down these hills, and at the top of that hill there is the beginning of a rope tow that they had in a flat top, and there's a very steep decline over there. So again, it was a wonderful spot for all kinds of leisure activities in the era when they lived here. This gentleman is right across the roadway from the 3 Graces, the 3 very graceful ladies. He presents quite a contrast with his very solid body, very still, his bowler hat and his suit. He is a sculpture by Fernando Botero, who is well known for his love of very rounded forms, large volume, and very smooth surfaces. The man on horseback is a recurring subject in Botero's art, both his drawings and paintings and sculpture, a memory of his father. Botero is a Colombian artist, and his father was a traveling salesman, which in those days meant that he traveled around to sell his goods on a horse. And Botero remembers his father getting all dressed in a bowler hat and a suit, looking very elegant and very proper, and taking off on his horse. You'll notice that Botero also doesn't pay much attention to normal scale in the world. The rider, the man, is almost as big, or in fact bigger than the horse. His legs are just about as big around as the horse's legs. And he seems to just sort of overwhelm the horse completely. Unlike Charles Rumsey, who's the surface of the sculpture, they're both bronze sculptures, is quite rough, and you can see the hand of the artist. Botero likes his surfaces to be extremely smooth. So it's a very attractive surface. You really feel like grabbing onto it and touching it. There's very little detail on this sculpture. You'll notice again, very simple. Everything is rounded: the hat, the arms, the legs, the eyes, the horse's head. The only detail you'll see is in the little tiny mustache over his lips, and which is the same kind of pattern as the horse's mane. And the other detail is on the saddle. There's some little tiny dots on the saddle. So very little ornamentation, mostly just this wonderful volume, this wonderful solid gentleman who greets visitors to the museum.
We continue on our exploration of the figure in sculpture. This is a work by the artist Bruno Le Casey. He was born in Italy. He was raised in a monastery where he was exposed to classical and traditional figures in sculpture. He continues this exploration in his own figurative work. He moves from the classical to more just observed scenes of everyday life. So he's combining his interest in the classical tradition of sculpture and the human form with a very kind of day-to-day scene of someone riding a bicycle. So what we have is, as we draw closer to the work, we notice it's a woman on a bicycle. As we start to really explore, the bicycle does not quite look as functional as it should be. It is missing some broken spokes. There is some kind of wear and tear on this vehicle that she's using. She's in the process of riding her bikes, but we notice that her foot has touched the ground and she has stopped. She's frozen in time. And though she's frozen in time, we still have this very dynamic sense of movement. We've got something that's happening here in this waist, which is a very classical traditional technique called contrapposto. And that means this S-curve, this sense of kind of rotating the torso to give a sense of movement. What Lucchese also did was his technique was building his sculptures out of clay and wrapping them in fabric to get these kind of the draping that's wrapping around the volume of the body. And then that clay model was cast into bronze, capturing every single kind of rough surface texture. When we start to look at this work, I would say that it's the most narrative out of all the works. Here is a woman apparently riding a bicycle, frozen, stopped in time. Her eyes, her sight line goes off into the distance. We don't know what she's looking at. We start to look at her face. There's a bit of maybe distress on her face. We're not sure what the story is. It's left for the viewer to complete. So I ask you to look a little bit and think, where might she be going? Possibly is she running away from someone? So it's really about the viewer kind of filling in the rest of the story.
Hi. I think this is probably the most popular sculpture on the whole property. Everybody wants to take a picture of this one. Tom Otterness is his name. Really, really funny name. Otter. Well, I'll show you in a second a little secret having to do otters. Actually, he's a good friend of mine. He's a big-time sculptor. Get another one. He does a lot of works for commissions, especially for courthouses and government buildings and big corporate commissions, but the most famous one, I think, for a lot of people who live in the New York area is in the subway system. He's the guy who did the crocodile coming out of the sewer grate and the little mice and all the different little animals that are running around on 14th Street. But we happen to have, I think, one of his most interesting sculptures. It's a big monumental version, cast, as we say, in bronze, this beautiful bronze with this lovely patina. And this kind of bronze, this kind of color, that is the kind of bronze that you see in a monumental sculpture by, for instance, Rodin or some big Civil War monument. What do you get? You get these two goofballs with their funny emoji smiles and their bag of money, easy money, fairy tale. And now I know Otterness well enough to tell you, you think you're smiling and you think it's fun and you think it's sort of a cheerful piece, very, very light, skim along the surface. There's always a deeper meaning with Tom Otterness, and very often it is what you would call satire. When he's saying easy money, he's saying beware easy money, because another piece in the same series is when they get down to their last penny. Sorry to ruin your mood, but what I like about it is it gives an added dimension to the thinking behind all of this. And that's one of the reasons why Otterness is revered as a satirical sculptor, as somebody who makes comments on society. And it's no secret that I'm in a Gilded Age mansion. This was big money, right? At the turn of the century in 1900 when this was built. This was Gatsby also. That was big money in the 1920s, the 1980s. Even now, easy money, no such thing. Now take a look around it, because this is another one of those sculptures that work very, very well from all different angles. If you look at these sort of clodhopper shoes and boots, the way in which he's done the folds, almost what you would call drapery studies down in the folds, the wonderful details in something like this. It doesn't lose its cartoonish fun, but it also brings you back into a very, very great tradition in sculpture, going back to the Romans, going even back to Chinese Shang Dynasty. Great bronze is a question of how something is crafted, how something is molded. Usually it's molded in, he's got a whole factory almost downtown in Manhattan that he works in, but you can do these things in clay before they're started. So you shape a mold, you create it, and back here there's a wonderful detail which I only just learned. Actually, it was a long time secret. I had to learn it from my colleagues. Back here is a funny little mark on this beautiful smooth bronze, and it's the paw print of an otter. The guy's name is Otterness. By the way, just so you know, Tom, Otterness, 2001 was the year, and 1 out of 3 mean this is cast number 1 of 3. There are only 3 of them in the world. And I think it's one of the most delightful pieces that we could have. It's one of these uplifting ones, and it's just perfect out of doors. If you took this thing inside, it would have an entirely different feeling, because as you see, the blue sky and the way in which the light goes on, this is called patina, this wonderful color that comes into it. And I think actually, in addition to being one of the most fun sculptures, it's a great way of asking this question: what do you do in the year 2001 with the wonderful tradition, the art historical tradition, of monumental works in bronze? And you probably all know that this is a really big issue right now. There are many bronze monuments that are being taken down all over the United States. So what deserves to be up in public? And this is Otterness' way of saying, I have this satire, I have this sort of funny, comical thing, but with a serious side. This is the monument to our time. This is a masterpiece. And I know a lot of people are going to say, oh, come on, Charlie. There are 3 huge rolled steel slabs, I'll call them, of what's called Corten steel. This is industrial steel, but I'll tell you where actually he originally got the idea and how these things are made, by a man named Richard Serra. Now, Serra, I don't think there's a bigger name right now in sculpture, in monumental sculpture in the world, a bigger name than Richard Serra. I think we're really, really lucky that he did this. He chose this away from the house, away from the other sculpture. He said, I want this place because in many, many ways, Serra's thing, and he's notorious for this, by the way, he fights with architects, he fights with governments, he fights with his patrons all the time. I don't want this to be some glorification of, for instance, a museum or a company. This piece has one and only one duty in a way, and that is the duty to the land, the duty to the site, S-I-T-E, site. This is called site-specific. It's the most beautiful Serra I've ever seen, and I know a lot of his work. I've seen him in galleries. I've seen him in front of big corporations, inside museums like the Guggenheim. This is the one, finally, where he makes peace with the landscape and the environment around him. And Richard Serra's whole deal can be summed up in one thing. It's the relationship between you, your body, your height, I happen to be really short, your body, your height, your scale, and the piece itself, and of course the space that's surrounding it. The closer I get to this thing, as you can imagine, the more monumental it becomes. As you can see, these 3 pieces, it's called Plum Run because the very, very top of these, when it was originally installed, were to be perfectly aligned. There's a moment as I walk down here, it's so much fun, by the way, when you come, you know, this is not the most accessible part of our property, but when you come, you walk, you say, I can see all 3 for only a moment. Then I get down to a right about, for me, here, and I cannot see the second one, because right now, they're perfectly aligned. And that's the kind of mathematical precision, by the way, that Serra is really well known for. Gives them an unfortunate connotation. They call this minimalism, when you just do something with just that geometric form and just that beautiful clean edge, and you sort of make people pay attention to how wonderfully perfect it is. Even though the land does this and this, the beautiful geometry of it stays right there. I'll tell you, when I'm having a bad day, I love to come out here because there's something about it that is quite calming. Now, if you come with me for a second, now it's getting bigger and bigger. And this thing is now dwarfing me with its scale, up to, like 12 feet high. And when I come around to this side, all of a sudden, all I've got is a line in nature. Like just one line. I don't have the plane on one side or the plane on the other side. I've just got this one fantastically perfect line. Now I'll tell you a little story about Richard Serra that I love. Richard Serra's dad was a shipbuilder in California. And when Serra was 7 years old, Dad brought him to the shipyard and said, "I want you to see what Daddy does." And little Richard Serra was looking up at this hull of a gigantic tanker, and he said to himself, "Oh man, I want to do this. I want to work with this." And these things are rolled in steel mills and steel plants. One of them is in Germany, in Bremen, Germany, where they build ships. They're rolled to his specifications. And then, of course, they're sunk in this. Now look how quiet that one is down there. And when you get out to about here, you're looking at this slab and you're looking at that one. And as you walk along, it seems like they open up and then they close, and then they change. And the wonderful word for that, by the way, when things seem to change, have you ever been driving alongside a vineyard when you see the rows of vines and they shift and then they shift again? That's called parallax. And Serra is a brilliant, brilliant artist when it comes to parallax, the way in which the optical illusion is played from one side to another. Now, I'm going to jump in and ruin your shot for a second and ask you to look at the color. These are meant to stay outside and rust a little. A moment ago I was talking about the patina on the Otterness. This is the patina on Corten steel. And many, many people, including me, we look at this beautiful streaks, the plum color, the purpley color, the deep reds and oranges. And you look at these and you say, there's something almost like a painting about the skin of a Richard Serra sculpture like this. It has some of the qualities of a very, very great American artist, abstract expressionist named Mark Rothko. Especially, for instance, this. This, by the way, is some knucklehead doing graffiti. But this is almost that painterly side. And when you have a chance to come and visit us here at the Nassau County Museum, this is the Serra in summer. You should see these big boys in fall, when all of this turns gold and orange and burgundy. Then, and I'm not making this up, you should see these things in winter, when this whole thing goes white. Each season, all seasons shall be sweet to thee, that wonderful line. This thing is beautiful and powerful and lyrical in all seasons. I hope you come someday, and it's almost like my little secret. We have it hidden back here away from the mansion. I hope you come someday and enjoy this masterpiece by Richard Serra. The newest sculpture in the whole property. In fact, the Nassau County Museum of Art, we commissioned this work by Marco Remick, R-E-M-E-C. He's a wonderful sculptor. He's known all over the country. He did a huge thing at a big museum called Mass MoCA, big international art star, right? So I said, okay, we want you to do a work, but we're going to let you pick the place right in front of the mansion, right? We're going to let you pick the place, and then you tell me what you need, and I bought him a telephone pole and a whole bunch of mirrors, and this is what he does. Now, in order to see this, it's called a wood that I wish for. But what he was trying to do with this is he was trying to do almost like a totem pole American, Native American totem pole, because what do you see when you look at a totem pole? You see the faces of your ancestors and the people who are on it. So watch. This is the perfect sculpture, by the way, for narcissists, because, you know, narcissists love to look at themselves in the mirror, right? So you look at this, and there it is. It's you. It's your face. Or in this particular case, it's the mansion, multiplied many, many times, all the way up to the top of the totem pole. What happens is this colorless surface, this mirrored surface, takes on the green of the vegetation, takes on the blue of the sky. It's got, unfortunately, it has me in it right now, but you know, it's got everything going on around it, and it picks it up. And great sculpture has to be seen from 360 degrees. You see what's going on from every single angle. A work like this almost has no front, no back, right? When he started it, he had strings on it, and he measured out where these mirrors were going to go at about 9-inch intervals. I was here with him, and he started to do it 9 inches, 9 inches, 9 inches. And this guy's a former Wall Street banker, by the way, so he knows his numbers. But this is what I really love about this sculpture. He started to adjust it a little bit, make it a little bit more human. Not something that could be just done on a computer or done with a ruler. He just sort of said, I think this would look a little bit better this way or that. The kids love it. Everybody who takes a picture wants to take a picture of this thing with the mansion behind it. Would That I Wish For by Marco Remick. So that about wraps it up for our wonderful tour, but let me just add one more thing. You are so welcome to come and visit us anytime. We're open from 7 in the morning until dusk for the outdoor sculpture that you've just been enjoying and for our beautiful gardens. We're open in the Tuesday through Sunday, and we have a wonderful exhibition for you to see when it's time. I am very committed, and my whole staff is very committed to accessibility, to helping people with disabilities get in and out. We've got that wonderful ramp, we've got a beautiful elevator, but most of all, we've got a great, great staff and group of volunteers, all of whom understand that it's terribly important that people who need a little help to get around a building or around the grounds are going to get a little friendly help from all of us. In addition, we are having a lot of fun these days putting things up online. We have a website, the Museum from Home. I'll give you the URL, nassaumuseum.org. You'll find videos, you'll find a drawing lesson that's incredible. You'll see all the pictures of the fun things that we're doing. But most important, I think you'll keep attached and engaged to what we're trying to do here. We think that this museum is a hidden gem in Nassau County and in the town of North Hempstead. A lot of people just don't know about us yet, and I think once you come, you'll be hooked. And when you come, ask for Charlie, I'm the director. Ask for Laura, she's my wonderful director of education. And Jean here, thanks for coming. See you soon.